All right, we're here with Ben Lupo, director of vocal music, grades 6 through 12 at Bryan City Schools. Where is Bryan City Schools, Ben?
Bryan City Schools is in very rural Northwest Ohio.
Okay,
We're
so
about
north.
15 miles from
I'm
Michigan
thinking,
and 15, sorry.
yeah, I'm thinking Northwest, yeah, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, right there.
Yep, right
Yeah.
there in the corner. We're 15
Okay.
miles from Michigan and 15 from Indiana.
Yeah. What's the name of the town?
Bryan.
Oh, Bryan. Oh, there we go. Bryan City.
Yep.
So, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in music, and doing what you do now.
Sure. So this is year 15 teaching. I've taught in Northwest Ohio for my entire career, although I grew up in Metro Detroit.
Mhm.
Um, I spent 4 years teaching for the Montpelier Exempted Village School District, which is about 15 minutes up the road.
Okay.
And I've been with Bryan for the last 11.
Okay. Wow. So, and have you, when did you start as a vocalist? I mean, most people start singing when they're pretty young, but how young did you know that you wanted to do this the rest of your life?
Uh, I ended up making the decision as a freshman in high school.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. My daughter is a freshman right now in high school and she sings and she's actually doing her first um musical tomorrow. So
Oh,
she's
fantastic.
yeah, she's
What
tired of
production?
they're doing Mean Girls, which is the
Okay.
popular one to do now.
Yeah, that's popular right now.
Yeah, and so she's super tired of all the practices and yeah, and then yeah, so vocal. So are you a bass tenor?
I'm
Where
a
are you?
baritone.
You're a bass. Okay, you're right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
All
Can't quite
right.
get all the high
That
notes,
works.
can't quite get all the low notes. Yep.
Right. So are you still perform do you still sing now or do you do anything outside of school?
I honestly, even outside of school, I'm directing. So I haven't really had too many
Yeah.
performance opportunities in a while. I sang with the Glass City Singers in Toledo for a
Yeah.
semester, but that was right before the COVID shutdown, and that
Yeah.
ensemble hasn't picked back up since.
Yeah.
I sang with the Hillsdale Arts Chorale for a
Yeah.
couple of years.
Okay,
But as
cool.
a solo performer, I haven't done a whole lot in the last 15 years.
What's your personal experience with auditions? Do you have any horror stories or or funny stories? We like those too.
Um, let's see. I'm not sure I really have any horror stories.
Yeah.
Um,
Once.
the Some went better than others,
Mhm.
but and I always ended up working myself up far more than I needed to. I mean,
Right.
if you're auditioning in a place where the environment is healthy,
Yeah.
nobody wants you to be more successful than the people who are auditioning you.
Okay.
They're
Right.
rooting for you to be successful. Nobody
Right.
wants to sit through a day's worth of terrible auditions.
Yeah, it's cringy, right? It's cringy. Yes.
Hmm.
So for these adult ensembles you're part of, how do they usually handle like getting into those? I mean, I'm sure there's different levels. Did adults normally have to audition for, adult chorale or
I think there are some adult community ensembles and semi-pro ensembles where there are audition components. More often
right.
than not, those auditions are just geared to make sure that a potential chorus member is sufficiently competent to be able to be successful in the ensemble.
Okay.
Um, I'll be honest, my experience auditioning for those
Uh,
ensembles was pretty minimal because
yeah.
they saw a choir teacher next to my name and just assumed I knew what I was doing. Uh,
Yeah, that's well. And so did you do a music education degree?
yes, my
Yeah.
both my bachelor's and master's degrees are in music education.
Okay, cool. Are you guys doing, I remember my daughter being in, the middle school choir.
Mhm.
What do you call it, middle school there? Or is it just one
Yeah,
camp?
it's middle school. Yeah.
Middle school, right? Yeah. So they had compulsory choir for
Mhm.
kids. So are you doing that too? Kids that are just placed in the class and then you have to teach them how to sing?
I would say the vast majority of my students self-select
Okay.
from sixth grade all the way through 12th. And that's one of the benefits. One of the benefits
Yeah,
of
no worries.
teaching in Bryan is all of my students elect to. Now, I will say there are times when the parents elect for them.
Yes.
And I've had a couple of students who have been dragged kicking and screaming into my ensembles on occasion.
I mean, do any of those ever convert to one of, to keep doing
Oh my
it?
goodness, yes.
Oh, really?
I had a student whose parents dragged him kicking and screaming
Yeah.
into choir, and he was convinced he was going to be miserable. He was convinced it was going to be terrible. This was as a sixth grader, and
Yeah.
he took choir all the way through his 12th grade year. In fact, his last 2 years, he elected to take two choirs as opposed to
Wow.
one during the school day. I have a couple stories like that.
Yeah. Well,
But I
choirs,
mean,
I love choir because I feel like, I was a trombone player and
Mhm.
there's so much to learning an instrument to get it to sound decent. And then acquire, not that singing is easier, but see, the challenges are different.
100%.
Sight reading, so challenging in singing. Because,
Agreed.
you can't just play the note. You got to know where it is, right? But the high school choirs I hear, I mean, they sound amazing. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's more simplified because you have everybody singing, right? But yeah, so you're dealing just with singing itself.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I don't have to deal with transpositions. I mean, don't get me wrong. When with middle school, I have to
Yes.
do a lot of transposing, but I don't have to do a lot of transpositions. I don't have
Okay.
to simplify parts, but I do have to change harmonies based on vocal ranges. Um, I would argue that it is easier to get a good sound for most people
Okay.
with the instrument they carry with them than it
Yeah.
is with the instrument they don't. Um,
So what's the biggest challenge then with a beginner, sixth, seventh grade?
there are a couple big challenges or potential challenges. If they aren't regularly singing in their
Hmm.
younger childhood, they come to you without the skill set that they need to be doing stuff that feels sufficiently complicated, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
have to go when you have to go back to hot cross buns,
Yeah.
but you should be playing something by Del Borgo. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yes. Okay.
So that would be challenge number one. Challenge number two is that the voice change is completely unpredictable in terms of when the
Right.
onset is.
Right.
So I have sixth graders. I have two of my sixth grade boys in the sixth grade choir who are in the middle of a voice change right now. One of whom is
Yeah.
struggling to find tonality. By the same token, my seventh and eighth grade treble choir is currently some of them are starting to undergo their voice change. So they had a really clear, vibrant tone, and it's become breathier as the vocal folds
Yes.
aren't ducting all the way. So when you put all those in the same room,
Yeah.
that can create some real difficulties because Johnny might be able to sing a low G, but Stan can't sing fourth line F.
Yeah.
And then
That.
how do you make
Yeah.
that into a choir when they don't have the aural sophistication always to be able to hold apart where their range is?
Yeah. I mean, there's really nothing else I could think of that is so music wise that is so intrinsically involved with your person. Like, you play the piano and every note sounds the same no matter who's playing it. I mean, yes, there's
Well,
intonation,
and to
but
add on to that too,
yeah.
I think when you're working with singers, I think that is a blessing and a curse because when you're looking at that too, when I look at most of my young adolescent female singers and my adolescent female singers, there if I screw up, I'm a cellist. If I screw
Oh,
up
really?
on the
Yeah.
cello, I can blame my instrument. I can say,
Well,
hey, my bow arm didn't do quite what I wanted to. I didn't use enough speed or pressure. I didn't drop my
yeah,
finger in the
it's
right spot.
physical. Yeah.
Yeah, but when
Yeah.
it's a singer, it's so much more intimate, it's so much more personal, and that can be when we're dealing with self-esteem issues in the first place, that can make it really difficult for them to be comfortable putting their sound into the room.
Yes, that's true because everybody literally sounds different
Yep.
singing. And what if you don't sound the way you think you should, especially if you record yourself?
Well, and what are
Yeah.
they comparing themselves to? They're comparing themselves to music that's been professionally processed.
Yeah, and maybe
We don't
auto-tuned.
hear live authentic performance often anymore.
Well, here's a sidebar though. I auto-tune is a big discussion, in music production.
Mhm.
And then of course, and then there's the other type of tuning. I forgot the other brand, but I think most people will probably be surprised to know how often it's used,
Mhm.
especially yeah, even live.
Yeah.
Does anybody in, the professional vocal world talk about auto-tune at all, or is it just like that's not our thing?
I think it depends where you are. I think,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't talk about it in terms of as a tool we use. I want to
right,
teach you how to use your instrument. I want you to
right.
discover your instrument. I want for you to learn how to use your instrument in the best way possible. And I want for you to get comfortable with the instrument that you have because I have not yet met a person who cannot learn to sing well. Now, some people
Really?
come at it with a lot
Okay.
with a lot more with a lot more ease than others. Some
Okay.
people have to plug the holes in that tonality bucket before they can carry it, but
Yep. You mean their attitude?
they
They
can learn to sing.
sing. You mean singing in tune, basically.
Absolutely, yes.
So what do you do with somebody? I'm thinking of my mom. Now, I hope she
Mhm.
doesn't hear this, but she cannot sing in tune, and she knows this. So what do you do with somebody who likes to sing, but then they're way out? How do you approach that?
Well, within the one-on-one setting is best, but
Right.
the biggest thing is figuring out where they are. Because if they're
Okay.
not singing in tune, I mean, It usually isn't. I mean, vast majority of people, this isn't a tone deafness issue. Less than 1/2 of 1% of the population is tone deaf.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it becomes an issue of the connection between what your ear is processing and what the musculature in your vocal mechanism is producing. So the end game is what you need to do is you need to train pitch relationships. And for us, what we do, we learn all of our music using solfege.
Right.
So,
Solfege.
so they learn. I mean, we talk about sight reading being more difficult for vocal musicians. I wholeheartedly agree. You have to teach the relationships. If you're struggling to sing in tune, the thing you teach isn't a really difficult piece of music. It's how do you sing and hear the relationships, and then how do you apply that into the music you're trying to sing. And it's a process. I have students who have they can have me for as many as 7 years in Bryan. I have students for whom it's taken 7 years to learn to sing in tune. And that can be difficult for the rest of the group, but everybody deserves the opportunity to learn to sing.
The reality is vocal music is the by far dominant type of music in the world. Looking at popularity, folk music, all kinds of it's people singing music. And in school, you have kids have a great opportunity to improve that skill, especially if they don't want to go into classical singing, that's fine, but they have the opportunity right there to learn from you. It's Stop Audition. Obviously, we have software to run auditions. So I like to ask people about auditions. Let me ask you first about your own groups. What do you do for group placements? I mean, you have productions and then you have different class periods, right?
So for productions, we do a paneled audition process where they come in and they sing something that they've prepared. They do a cold reading. I'm talking for musical theater here. They'll do a cold reading, and then I'll usually vocalize them because there isn't a sample in a piece of musical theater that gives the totality of the range a singer is going to need for a production. And you want to make sure they're going to be successful where you're going to plug them. So that's usually how we approach that from a musical theater perspective. For my classroom, most of my ensembles, like I said earlier, are self-selected. So my top mixed ensemble, students just ask me if they can be part of that ensemble. I don't hold formal auditions for that ensemble anymore. Generally speaking, a student knows whether or not they're putting the time and dedication required to be successful there. And if I don't think they're ready, it gives me an opportunity to have a frank conversation with them about the areas where they need to still grow.
Did you used to do something different?
When I first started, the procedure in Bryan was to do a choral placement audition. I did that for 1 year, and I did not find, for me, in my placement with my students, that was not the most effective way to voice.
Right. And were you taking class time out to do that?
No, I did all that outside of school.
Right. Which is more time for you.
100%.
And if you really know the kids and how they can sing, you might not need that. Right. So for the production, what kind of productions do you guys do? Like,
we actually just closed Jekyll and Hyde on Sunday.
I'm learning a lot about vocal and theater auditions. It's new to me. And then my daughter's doing them. So she's auditioning for these musicals. So you have an audition for a musical, like in a school. How does that normally handled? So I signed up for it. What happens? What do I have to do as an entrant?
So I hold usually 2 learning sessions, and I teach them the basics of the vocal excerpts they're expected to sing.
Okay.
Which is not a common procedure. That's a procedure for me.
Okay.
We don't have access to a lot of private teachers in my area. We're at least an hour from the nearest major city. Toledo is an hour away from us. Fort Wayne, Indiana is an hour away from us, and you have to go farther north to find a major city in Michigan.
Right.
So we kind of are the cultural epicenter for our area of Northwest Ohio.
Okay.
So I provide that opportunity for them so they have a baseline, something they can practice against. I let them record it if they feel so inclined, if they don't have that skill set on their own.
Right.
And then after that, they sign up for an audition slot. I go through it in that process as well. This is what you can expect. This is what's going to happen. These are the things we're looking for. We want you to be successful, all of which are completely true.
Right.
And then they'll sign up for an audition slot. They'll come to our arts and education auditorium, and they'll perform their excerpts. We'll do callbacks if needed, and then they post a week or so later.
And what I've learned is, seems like sometimes you're auditioning for a specific part, and sometimes you're just auditioning. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I give students the option of selecting whether they are interested in particular roles, and then I also make sure that they indicate whether or not they're willing to accept roles outside of the ones they're most interested in. Because quite frankly, I mean, as adults, we don't always have the self-awareness to really always know where we are best going to fit.
Right.
These kiddos
Yes.
have no idea. And sometimes
Yeah.
they think they're cut out to play a principal character when a supporting character they'd be very successful in. Or sometimes they think they need to be a member of the
Mm.
chorus. I've had students walk in
Yeah.
thinking that they were going to be part of the chorus who played the title lead.
Yeah.
They just
Wow.
don't have an awareness. And you need to get an idea for what level of commitment they're willing to put in and
Mm.
whether or not they're willing to step outside of where they believe themselves to best fit.
And you said you handle audition, or you've adjudicated, done auditions outside of school.
Yeah, the OMEA All-State Choir. Yeah.
At Snap, we're really interested in procedure and like how people go about doing these auditions. And then of course we want to help people find the best way to do it, including efficiently.
Mhm.
And then also in a way that makes the kids or whoever's auditioning better, like
Mhm.
serves them. And then actually thirdly is, a fair process. What is the biggest challenge you think in that whole process is, especially as a judge or adjudicator person?
I think there are two substantial challenges. I think the first one is volume. And I'm not talking like equalization volume. I'm
Yeah.
talking the
Number of
sheer
people.
volume of auditions. If
Yeah.
I'm listening to, let's say for the Ohio All-State, 150 first sopranos, trying to find a way to rank them.
Yeah.
I mean, you can score them against a rubric, but over time you get about 75 in, even if you're doing a couple a day, you
Yeah.
get to a point where is my scale actually still tuned the same way it was when I started? So I think the volume of
Yes.
auditions can create difficulty. You want to make sure that you're being as objective as you can in a subjective art, right? So I think that's big challenge number one. And I think as an adjudicator, the other component that is really challenging is the inherent inequity in the technologies used to do the recording in the first place. You can tell within
Okay.
15 milliseconds of listening to an audition whether or not the teacher who was recording has a proper microphone, has the student set up in the right spot, if the student recorded themselves, if the piano is placed properly so that you can hear both the piano and the vocalist in a way that
Right.
you can actually evaluate the voice. And I think that can be a really substantial impediment for individuals that don't have access to the equipment or personnel who are educated to provide them with an audition experience that allows them to be successful.
No, I'm tracking with everything you said because, first thing, the number of people, coming from the jazz space, there's not as many auditioners, but also there's a lot more diversity of instruments and like categories, which, if you have 20 basses, it's challenging to find if they're close. Because I always think if I'm listening to musicians or vocalists, I can immediately tell if one is a lot better than the other if I'm
Mm-hmm.
comparing two. But I don't know as far as determining one or two, I have to know exactly what I'm looking for. If you're doing 150 to fill, how many slots are you traditionally trying to fill
Well,
with it?
let's say for first sopranos, let's say it's a 200 member ensemble. You're going to have bass one, bass two, tenor one, tenor two, alto
Right.
one, alto two, soprano one, soprano two. So we're looking at roughly 25 singers per voice part.
Yeah.
Beyond that, you also I can think this voice is outstanding. I can think this voice is also outstanding. But if
Right.
you put them next to each other, it's cats and dogs. So
Yeah.
you have to
It's
also
yeah.
audition them with a mind for how is this going to fit together?
How it's going to fit together, you mean within the ensemble?
Yeah, blend.
Okay. Which is a good point because you are auditioning for an ensemble. You're not auditioning to be a soloist.
Exactly.
That's one reason we made this rubric builder for Snap Audition. I've come across so many audition people, administrators, whatever, who just kind of tell the judges, pick the best one or whatever. And like,
Yep.
for number one, that's a bad idea. Number two, think of the goal. What's the end goal here? Is the end goal finding the best piano player, or is it finding the best one to fit in this ensemble, right? Like you said. Yes.
100%.
Yes. But that really has to be communicated back to the student. I feel it's fair to them to say, you might be amazing, but maybe not for this ensemble. Right?
I would agree. I think
Yeah.
one of the areas where we kind of stink when it comes to auditioning for honors ensembles, at least in my area, and part of
Uh,
it's just it comes back to volume. It takes a lot to be able to provide feedback back, and you don't want people challenging the final decision of the adjudicators or not believing that the process is fair.
Yeah.
But by the same token, if you don't get in, that's fine and dandy. And yes, it might be an encouragement to go again, but you don't want a lack of feedback to cause discouragement and have somebody not try out who might be really successful in another year.
Yeah. And well, that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big thing for our software too, was you look at everybody really wants to give feedback, but the logistics of it is such a pain. And that's really, that was one of the big motivations for me in creating the software, was not only making it easier, but like, how do we make this, the feedback part should be automated. You should just send it to them. You know, this is 2024. Kids spend so much time preparing for these auditions, and it's such an honor for them. But we can also provide an educational component to the audition where they're like, hey, I didn't make it, but at least I got these things right, and I need to work on these things. And that's beneficial. So the other thing you said was the technology part, which, you know, number one, it sounds like number one, does the teacher recording the audition have the knowledge of how to set things up? And do they have the right equipment? The reality is now, you know, you can get a decent recording from just a phone, and actually you can hook up a USB mic to this. There's actually, I wrote an article about it on our site. Yeah. So have you ever had an audition? I'm asking this, but I probably know the answer, where you just couldn't decipher what was going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
And so what do you know, what's the process? Did the competition have a way to deal with that, or how did you deal with it?
No, those auditions were largely discarded, because if there isn't enough to evaluate, I can't tell you if you're going to be successful. And if I have auditions who are going to be successful, it stinks, but there really isn't a way around it. I can't reach out to 15, 20 more people and say, hey,
no,
I need to submit another one.
Right. And in things like these all-state auditions or city or whatever they are, I think everybody involved, the parents and teachers, everybody needs to know that the budgets are very small for these competitions. My son auditioned for the Young Arts competition a few months ago, the National Endowment for the Arts, and they have like a $30 million budget because they get grant money, and the procedures they have and everything is so much different than like the state of Colorado where I am. But the budgets are just so small, and they don't have time to pay you to contact every single person and say, hey, could you re-record that? And
well, and most of your, like my judges, when I coordinated the All-State, my judges were volunteers. I didn't pay them. When I adjudicate for the OMEA District 1 Honors Festival, I'm not paid to evaluate the students. It's just something that I do because it needs to be done.
That's
and I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, but the thing is, if it becomes too much of a time commitment, if I have to go back and contact 15, 20 people, I'm less likely to sign up for that, because quite frankly, I am volunteering the time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Something we all need to be aware of is how do we make it as easy as possible for the judges to do their job, maybe push some things back to the student and to their teachers and say, hey, this is the proper way to set this up, blah, blah, blah. What would you improve, at least in the all-state process you've been involved in? What do you think are the things that could be tweaked?
Well, and this might have changed. I mean, I'm now 2 years out of date.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of my all-state knowledge, but
yeah,
I would like to see a standardized rubric for all, maybe using the OMEA AE, that we have basically an OMEA 5-point plan, and that's how all ensembles and soloists are adjudicated across the state. I'd like to see that maybe be utilized as the rubric that is disseminated to the all-state chairs. I'd like to see that, I think. And again, that might have happened since I've been chair.
Yeah, sure. Right. The sheer number, what do you think are some things that could be tweaked to make the sheer number thing, the volume, better?
I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure that there's much you can do about that, because I can't take the first sopranos and give them two different judges and say, you judge this half and you judge this half, because you're going to be looking at two different scales, even using the same rubric. The number, it's just not going to line up. I think for that one, you just need to have ample lead time, so you don't have to sit there and marathon for 3 straight days in the summer auditions.
Okay, that's right. So I mean, just the idea of doing that, maybe the audition industry, if it exists, there needs to be just a number of people that the human brain can comprehend in one day, and we kind of know, oh, okay, once you get beyond this, it just becomes muddy. It's too muddy, right?
Yep.
And then say, okay, if that's true, maybe then we need a different way to slice and dice all this. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm thinking different rounds or whatever, which overcomplicates. But I think what I hear from you is it just becomes overwhelming to where your judging becomes not effective. And then, right.
You start to question it. Now, I mean,
Yeah.
and you hope you're doing right by everybody, right? I mean,
Right.
nobody's going to that going, man, I hope I don't get that audition, I score that audition properly. But
Right.
you start to get to a point. It's like, okay, I think they fall here. But when you have 150 of them, you're not going to be able to go back two, 3 times and listen to all of them multiple
No,
times.
no, no. Yeah.
It's just not feasible. So
Right. Well, and also I've noticed some audition material, the music or scales, whatever they're doing, they're not hard enough. But then sometimes, well, if they're too hard, then that's a problem. But if they're not hard enough, you don't have enough, things to decipher people. The recording part, though. So at your school, I've come across a lot of teachers. I've been around education a lot, and there's such a diversity of knowledge of technology, and just especially I remember last year, my daughter was in a middle school production. The middle school drama teacher did a production, but the middle school had no way to do sound reinforcement or a PA for the kids. So I went and tried to help out, but she really was overwhelmed, the teacher, of how do you get the kids on stage so the audience can hear them, right? And I see a lot of that where they just, number one, they don't have the equipment, or the district has something. How do you think we can help teachers who might not know the proper way to record? Like, what's a good way to resource them or like encourage them?
when you don't know how to do something, what's the first thing you do?
Google.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So if there's I mean, if there were a series of YouTube tutorials,
Right.
that would probably be the easiest way, because that's what I mean. When I don't know how to do something, if I don't know how to change the cabin air filter in my car, I'm going to go to YouTube,
Yes.
look up my model, and try to figure it out.
Right. But yeah, that this is our world we live in. But I've noticed is if I YouTube audition, it's really challenging because most of it is either theater, acting, or there's not a lot actually for the scenario. Oh, I'm just a choir teacher that needs to record this on a
Yep.
phone or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
On
we
a phone, I
need,
mean, I use the Yeti Blue microphone
yeah,
back from
that's
my
what I
grad school days.
that's what I
That
have now.
works great.
Right. Right. We need to be better at thinking of the whole process and
Mhm.
resourcing people with get this, do this, boom, 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 boom. And then this is how you test how it sounds. Right.
But I think part of this also
Yeah.
plays back to teacher education programs.
Okay.
I mean, and I'm not maligning teacher ed programs, but I do think that the reality is, if you're going to be teaching at a middle or secondary school level,
Yeah.
you're going to need to prepare auditions. You don't need to be a master's audio engineer to be able
Right.
to put out, using Audacity, which is free,
Yeah.
using a $50 used Yeti Blue microphone,
Right.
or using your cell phone, setting things up in a way that gives your student the best opportunity to participate in these ensembles, because they're life-changing opportunities for a lot of these kids.
Yeah. Music. I talked to a lot of people on this podcast about music education and what we could improve. You probably didn't in your program have a music production class that was required, or maybe actually more important would be sound reinforcement class, PAs and running all those. But it's like we just, sometimes we just assume that because the technology is there, we will figure out how to use it because Apple came along and made the phone easy to use, so it must be easy to use.
I guess my last thoughts would just be, teachers, you're overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. We're all overwhelmed. If
Yeah.
you're preparing students for auditions, once you've done that, do, at the very least, do yourself the service of doing a sound check to make sure your balance is the way that you want it to be, and make sure that you're doing what you can with whatever equipment that you have to provide the best recording and the best example of what your kiddos can do to the people who are auditioning them.
Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Ben, and we'll keep in touch.